Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 23, and in this episode, before we jump into issues of the free market, we're just going to look at a couple of current events using the method and tools that I've been going over these past few episodes, okay? And by doing this, I want to sort of reemphasize, bring back to the fore that it's not about right or wrong. It's not about I have the right position, and so therefore, if someone asks me a question, I'm going to give them the right answer. It's not about that, right? And so, if there is no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's just everything is subjective. We believe the things that we believe because that's our subjectivity. Okay, and our subjectivity is influenced not only by our place in space-time, but also by our knowledge and our understanding, the information that other people have given to us or even socialized us with that shapes our perspective. And so if we remember that everything is subjective, then what our goal is to always look for a better interpretation, a better way of understanding the world, so then we can make better uh, personal choices, right? Choices which affect ourselves directly every day, every moment. And that's the goal. Okay. So it's not about right or wrong. And both of these issues, I would wager the probability that any of you are related in any way with either of these issues is slim, not completely non-existent, but it would be a low probability. The first event is the Ukraine war, or the Russian war, or the proxy war, the NATO proxy war, call it whatever you will. The conflict that's happening in the Ukraine, just by tossing out a couple of names, you can see that there are a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of subjectivity surrounding such a large event, particularly in light of the previous weekend's uh, events. And this is the last weekend of June 2023. Apparently, there was an attempted coup, or was it a coup? Was there a betrayal, or wasn't there one? Was this a planned pretend betrayal? Was this all theater? Again, there are lots of different interpretations, but a lot of people, when it was unfolding, a lot of people were quick to be subjective, and either they celebrated or they were unhappy or they were sad. I just kept thinking of the big picture, and I thought that it was kind of interesting that unfortunately a lot of the loud voices, the more vocal voices, sort of tend to ignore a lot of the bigger picture issues. Okay. So there's all of these interpretations and opinions, subjectivities regarding everything that's happening in the Ukraine. But here's the thing: what does it have to do with you, right? For most people who don't have to go and fight, the effect is very minimal. However, whatever the government position is on the matter does indirectly affect you. And the fact that most people don't really understand what that cost is, what those consequences of the policies that the government is pursuing, that contributes to an even higher cost, right? That a lot of people have to pay that they are completely unaware of. So, how would you even begin to get a sense of what the cost was, the cost of making a choice, the cost of choosing what to believe when it comes to the war in Ukraine? And the way I like to start it out with is, if you had to go to the front lines and try to kill people or try to not be killed, what would you rather have? So if you were on the front lines, you're in the trench, you're cold, you're miserable, you're separated from your family. Maybe many members of your family are already dead. And someone came to you, right, in a dream and said, you can choose. If you, between two things, like no war and your family is alive and you're sitting at home and you're chilling out with them, or half of them are dead. Here you are. The probability of you dying is very, very high. Which do you want to choose? Now, most people, in spite of any political ideology, would say, well, if I could have peace and be at home with my family and create all these wonderful memories, I'd rather have that, right? So how can I have that? But see, that's not even considered right now, right? And that's what I think is problematic. There is no option for peace. It's war or war, war or more war, right? That's basically the choice that is given to most people in this discussion. But, if you were to imagine what would be better, right? If you could choose as an individual, regardless of all the government propaganda, what everyone is trying to tell you, why we have to support this war. Another way of looking at it is, okay, so let's just say we're here in America and someone says, hey, do you support the war in Ukraine? And if you say yes, that would mean that you have to enter the military, get trained, a fraction of the time that is required and advisable. And now you're on the front lines, shooting at people and getting shot at. Well, how great would that be? Right. And you might say, well, I'm too old or I'm too young to participate in the war. Okay, fine. Then help pay for the war. Right. And let's pretend a perfect world where government can't just simply raise our taxes through inflation, right? But they actually have to get money from the public in order to send to other countries. Then your bill would be $100,000, right? And so if you're not going to go and fight, then you got to cut a check for $100,000. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be like, oh, yeah, wait right there. I'll just write that check for you right now. Or would you say, okay, what's the option where I don't have to join the military and go fight in the Ukraine, and I don't have to cut you a check for $100,000? And then the reply would be, well, okay, well, then you have to, sue for peace. You got to negotiate for peace. And this doesn't occur to a lot of people because they don't know the cost, right? They don't have to pay anything, or at least they think they don't. Because the government says, oh, yeah, we're just going to cut a check for $2 billion for the Ukraine. And it seems like you didn't have to pay anything. The government is paying for that contribution. But what a lot of people don't understand is, where's the government getting that money, right? And so it usually hits them a couple of years later. But nevertheless, if you had to pay for your choices, it's very possible that you would make different choices. Your opinions would be different, right? And a lot of people have the opinions they have now because the costs of the choices that they are making are hidden, right? They're obscured. And so people don't realize that they're actually paying for all of this government, for all this government action, for all this killing and bombing and diversion of resources. Instead of building, we're bombing. Instead of fostering, we're destroying, right? And this is kind of more of what I'm trying to get people to see. You can make whatever decision that you want, except you have to pay for those choices. Now, obviously, we don't live in a society where you actually have to pay directly in the way that may be desired. Nevertheless, personally, because I know that just because it's obscure doesn't mean that it's not there, then always my position would be, what is the position that has the greatest benefit for the most number of people, and I get to do what I want to do. All right, I have 4 kids, 4 sons actually, and their age range is pretty broad. I don't want them to go have to fight in a war because some government decided that they're not going to negotiate, that they don't want to talk for peace, like talk things out. They're going to shoot first, bomb first, because they hate someone so much that they only see this as an opportunity to take them out, to kill them. That has nothing to do with me. I mentioned it before in the video on Memorial Day, but if you watch a lot of the Hollywood movies, I mean, this lesson is out there that a lot of people talk big, but when they get to the front lines, they realize, oh dear God, I made a mistake. I'd rather be at home. Why am I doing this? That becomes a reality for too many people, for a lot of people. Unfortunately, though, they don't come to the realization until they're actually there. Listened to someone today, and he said that he saw a video of a Ukrainian officer trying to get his soldiers to come out of hiding to attack Russians, and because they weren't, he threw a grenade into the bunker where they were hiding. Right? He's like, well, if you're not going to come out and fight, then you're worthless, and so you may as well be dead. And he threw a grenade in there to try to kill them. And so I think whatever people think is going on in the Ukraine, uh, I am pretty sure it has nothing to do with reality, right? What we imagine is happening over there and what's actually happening there, two completely different things, right? So all of us should have to pay for our choices. We shouldn't be able to force other people either to pay for the choices that we want other people to make, or to force other people to do things that they don't want to do. The second example I want to examine is OceanGate's submarine. I mentioned it before, but this is the submersible that went down and imploded on its way to check out the Titanic. And there are things that we can say about it, but and I mentioned already that the design flaws of that Titan sub was known, everyone knew, but yet the CEO, the owner of that company, pushed on. He wanted to be cutting edge, do things that other people were too afraid to do. And so basically, he ignored the cost of his discrimination. If you go back to earlier episode 8, where I deconstructed race, then this makes more sense. But everyone discriminates, right? We all, when we make a choice, what we're saying is not this, that. And when you make a distinction that way, when you make a choice, you are discriminating. Why not that? Why this? Okay. And so there is a cost in the way we discriminate. Okay. Everyone discriminates. And so by definition, if you want to be a little bit funny, everyone's a racist, right? And it's not a big deal. It becomes a big deal when you force everyone to discriminate in exactly the same way that you discriminate. Now we have institutionalized discrimination. Right now, by law, you have to discriminate this way. And that's what some people will call institutional racism. Okay. But there is always a cost for discrimination. If some people want to buy a BMW, other people will buy a Kia, whatever, a Korean car, a Chinese car, whatever. So when you realize that there is a difference in the cost, well, then our decisions are shaped by just how expensive the cost is. And as long as you are willing to pay the cost of your choice, as we just said, have at it, because everyone else is still free to make the choice that they want to make. So the sub owner, the Titan, the OceanGate CEO guy, he decided that he was going to have experts on his payroll who were not old white men. So he discriminated against experienced submariners, right? People who were on submarines for the US Navy. He said, don't want to hire them because they're old white men and it doesn't look good in the brochures. So I want young people. I want beautiful people. I want exciting people so they can be inspirational for other people who are even younger. And you can't be inspirational if you're an old white dude. Even if you are experienced, you're accustomed to going into submarines. I have a cousin who tried to be a submariner. And to be an officer on a nuclear submarine, it's, I think, one of the toughest things. He explained to me it was the second hardest thing to go for at Annapolis, which is the university run by the Navy, right? So the hardest is to be a Navy SEAL. The second hardest thing is to be a submariner. And he was going to try to be an officer on a submarine. And it is brutal tough, right? Because you're underwater and not everyone can do this. But he discriminated against people like that. And so he's going to go for less experienced young people who have an inspirational story. Okay, you got a story, not a whole lot of experience. Now, at first, right, because this was like, I believe, the fourth dive that sub made to the Titanic, the first three were perfectly fine. And so the first three trips, he got to brag, he got to make those brochures, make the videos and say, look how innovative I am, look how creative I am. I'm not hiring these old white guys, I'm going for the inspirational story. And so I'm sure, just like Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, and FTX, in the similar way, he got to market himself based on his supposed success. But the cost was still there, and it remained hidden until the implosion, right? So he had to pay for his discrimination, and because his discrimination was so bad, it resulted in his death, right? It was the ultimate cost, right? So this is what I wanted to highlight, is that you can believe anything you want. You can discriminate any way you want. You can choose anything you want, but there is always risk. And because there is risk, people who see the risk are free to make different choices, right? So James Cameron, who did the movie Titanic, he knew right away that, and this was years ago, he knew any sub that was designed and made with carbon fiber, carbon composite, whatever material that you were using, would fail eventually because it degrades over time. And he even warned another person, hey, you're going to die in that thing if you try to go down deep. And then after that, he didn't really pay attention to what other people were doing. He was focusing on his own sub. And he has dived already to depths 3 times deeper than where the Titanic is. But anyway, that's for something else. So he discriminates for safety. And so all he wants are the experts. Who is the best, the very best when it comes to deep sea diving? And if they're old white men, doesn't matter, because that just is a coincidence. What he wants is that knowledge and experience. And so his discrimination was probably more expensive, but he gets to live longer, right? And so everyone is free to do whatever it is they want. But if you see the potential problems, then you are free to explore options, right? And so what all of us have to remember is that there is always risk in choice and our belief, aka religion or morality. And once you realize that you are responsible, then you take more care. You're more careful. You do more research before you commit, right? Because the responsibility is all on you. And if you have the potential to lose your life, then you're ultra careful. This means then that if you have no liability, right? If you are not responsible for whatever happens, you get to make all the money, you get to make all the profit, you get to take all the credit. But when things go wrong, you pay nothing, you suffer nothing, then you're going to commit even greater bad choices, right? You're going to make even worse choices because you don't have to be responsible. You don't have to pay for damages. And big pharma right now, it's like the large global pharmaceutical companies have zero liability for a lot of the drugs that they're selling now. A lot of the procedures that they're recommending, there's no liability. You cannot sue them. They suffer nothing. So they get 100% of the up, 0 of the down. And people who use their products, they are the ones that have to pay. And see, this is a very unjust situation. And if more people understood this, then you would advocate for greater liability, responsibility for the people who are selling the products, and more protections for the people who are using the products, right? And this is more of the situation. I had another example, but I wasn't going to go into it. We ran out of time. But one thing that we have, just to wrap it all up, everything is subjective. Everything has a relative cost. And so what we want is, if this choices that we're presented with are not very good choices, we want better, right? What else is out there? And in order to have this kind of situation, we need to be as flexible as possible. We need to be as free as possible, right? Without restriction. And then once we explore all of our options, then we look for what is best. That alone will protect us more than any corrupt government regulation, right? Because they are going to be corrupt because of their subjectivity. But that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next episode.